welcome to my show. I want to introduce you to my audience. Well,
Yes.
although you are very well known in the writing world, Sara Hagerty. I know, listen, with my pronunciation, you correct me if I'm saying it incorrectly, but it's
Uh,
Hagerty,
yes. Well,
right?
I pronounced it a certain way for a year before my mother-in-law corrected me when I was
Uh,
newly married. So,
so how do
so
you
we
how did
say Hagerty, but I
he
don't. I hear it
Hagerty?
all the ways because for a year I said it Haggerty. So
Yeah, so Higgery. So
Haggerty, yeah.
okay, Sarah Higgery.
Yes, that's
she
right.
she is a best-selling author and Jesus followers. She's the wife of Nate, who just tried to help us with the sound system.
He's also my sound guy.
So, yes, I can totally relate to that. And she's the mother of 7 children, 4 adopted from Africa and 3 through miraculous pregnancies, which I know some of your journey in that regard.
Mhm.
And she's a life lover of words, and she knows the power of a thoughtfully crafted phrase. And that's one of the things that I love about your writing is about how you know how to craft the words just right to connect with your heart, with express the things that people deal with their walk with the Lord, and everybody when we do life. So I love that. She has the popular adoration series on her website. And of course, all that information is going to be on my show notes. She has also become a voice of hope and encouragement to millions of people who have faced unwanted circumstances in their lives, which we all have, and people who long for God to meet them in the middle of their crisis. And she has 3 previous books and a brand new one launching soon. And the first one was Every Bitter Thing is Sweet, which was launched in 2014.
Mhm.
And now I have a copy right here of her brand new book, The Gift of Limitations, Finding Beauty in Your Boundaries. Sarah, tell me a little bit about what made you become a writer. Tell me, how did this process start?
Well, I've always loved words. I was the kid who my mom couldn't find me, and I'd be holed up in a swivel chair that we have in our sunroom just reading. And I would take frequent bike trips to the Reading Railroad, the bookstore at the end of our street. Words have just been such a part of my life, but I never thought I'd be a writer. I just knew that I loved to read. But then when we started walking through our adoption process, those were in the early days of blogging.
Mm-hmm.
And people would have their blogs, but then they'd have a blog roll along the side where there were other blogs that they read. I don't know if you remember those
Yes,
days.
I we probably started blogging around the same time.
Yes, right, around 2009 or 2007, 8. And so I started a blog just to let our families get a window into our adoption process. And as I started to write, I realized, oh, this is a latent part of me. This is unlocking parts of my heart and my story. And I loved doing it and wanted to do more. So I had some kind of God moments along the way where friends or acquaintances reached in and helped me in the process to actually put my words into a book. But it definitely hasn't been a lifelong dream. It's just that I love to read books. And I think when you love to read, you end up being
Yes,
somebody who actually loves to write also.
absolutely. You and I have a very similar journey because
Really?
it was the same thing with me. I've always loved reading. As a matter of fact, like when people say, "What's your hobby?" Reading.
I can see from
I
what's behind you. I can see on the book wall behind you.
yes, and I love reading. And same thing as since I was a child, and I mean, I didn't, I was a speech therapy by trade is what I went to school for, and so I never imagined that God was going to call me to start writing. And you are so right. Like when you read so much, and we love reading so much, you end up it's just
Comes
normal that you're going to
naturally.
become a writer,
Yes.
but yeah,
Oh,
so I never imagined that too. And same thing, God opens doors that only he can open. And so it's very similar, our stories. And
wonderful.
well, and I know that with every book that you have written, and that's very very common, of course, for nonfiction writers is that they are a part of the journeys that
Mhm.
we go through, right? As
Mhm.
believers, in our case, because we write Christian nonfiction books. Tell me, why did you write The Gift of Limitations?
Well, as you said earlier, I have 7 children, and I had been living limited for a long time in different seasons. I was in my 20s and into my 30s, struggling through over a decade of infertility. My dad died young. I had a lot of series of events in my life where I felt limited but couldn't name my limitations. I just lived in response to them. And it's only been in the last probably 5 or 10 years where I started to name my limitations and experience that when I could name the things that I resented, they actually began to take different shape and form, and I began to see the gift in them. And so it felt natural that this next book that I wrote would be one that is coming out of what I've been living, which is extremely limited, and finding God's gift in the limits.
Such a hard journey, right?
Oh,
To be able to actually find the gift in the limitation
mhm.
while you are in the middle of it, because it's very easy to be able to see them when you're on the other side of the valley,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
So I mean, it's very easy because our God is a good God. So He's writing a story while you're going through that limitation that feels like bondage to you.
Mhm.
But it's so hard to be able to see that. So, what an important book that I'm assuming in your heart, your desire is for people to be able to see the gift of their limitation while going through that, while
Yes.
right in the middle, right? So,
Real
how,
time.
tell me, what was the process for you to be able to actually kind of unravel, yes, like to
Mhm.
just put that in an order.
Yes. Well, I think it for me, in my own personal life, I would say maybe the most recent limitation that I've noted is I had actually after all those years of infertility, then I did have biological children, and I had a surprise pregnancy at age 42. And that was our seventh child. She was not what we had planned, and I started to go, I already felt like I was drowning. I already felt like I was sinking, and now, Lord, you're giving me a baby. And so as I began to walk out really the grief, not of this child, but the grief of being even further limited in my life. And then I started to see as this child came forth, and she is the absolute light of our lives in our home. She's just a total delight. And to see the beauty that God gave us in this massive limitation, it felt natural to want to write about it. For me, part of my own healing process, my own growth in God, is I write. And so, as much as I'm writing about stories from a decade ago, I'm also writing relatively real time because I woke up this morning feeling limited and wanting to resent what God had given me and starting to work through again in a new way today, just like I did yesterday. What does it look like to bring the limitations you resent before God and see what He has for them?
I love that. And Sarah, so you mentioned, of course, it was this that the birth of this child, that you no, you had not planned. In other words, was really what prompted you to really wrestle with your limitations at that first time, or was it earlier limitations that prompted you to actually try to find God?
Interestingly enough, I think my first brush with my limitations was in my 20s and into my 30s when I began a 10 plus year journey through infertility. Ironically, right? And I had friends who I was attending baby shower after baby shower and first birthday parties and second birthday parties and third birthday parties, still childless. And I realized that what was a rite of passage for so many women was a do not enter sign for me. It was like the first big no that I heard in my life from God. And so as I experienced that, I wrestled through profound grief over not getting what was on the other side of the fence line. So I had to start to see this thing that I'm resenting is going to kill me if I keep giving it power to uh, power, meaning when I don't name it, or I can begin to name this limitation and name what I'm feeling and partner with God to see, what do you have for this story?
The first thing is to really come to the Lord and acknowledge, right, that this is a struggle, that you are suffering, of course. And you
Yes.
say something, that navigating the tension of life can be challenged. And you use these two terms, sometimes it's too much and it's not enough. Right. You
Mm-hmm.
use that right in the introduction of the book. You talk about that, like life is too much or it's not enough. How do you personally navigate these challenges or this tension?
I think there's a power in naming our limitations, and there's an even greater power in actually grieving them. We as Christians often want to skip steps. So I know that the end of the story is that I'm content, right? That I'm content with what God's given me. And I want to just coach myself into contentment, when I think God has a process that He gave us actually in His Son, where we come face to face with the cross that God has given us. Many of us don't want to name that our limitation is a cross because that feels so dramatic. But the reality is, it's producing overwhelm in us, it's producing fear, it's producing anger. There's a lot of things that happen because of our limitations and how we respond to them, that I think we can safely say, this is a cross in my life. So to walk this journey of naming it for what it is, it's a heavy burden to face this limitation. And then walking through the Saturday of Easter weekend, where I grieve and I sit in the pain of what it feels like to be limited. And I don't skip steps and coach myself into being happy about it, but I let God hold me. His word says He's near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit in Psalm 34:18. So I let myself be held by God and I name it. This is hard. In some situations, it's crushing me to have this limitation. And then I watch what He does with the story that He's given me, not the story that I want.
I love that you remind us, you're reminding me, as a matter of fact, today, that God gives us permission to struggle with things that we thought that we had overcome, and that we had, limitations that we have faced in the past and even responded in a more positive way. In other words, like,
Mhm. Yes.
so, but then, so I'm facing this right now in my life. And that's why I think that this book is a gift to me first, because through some changes in my husband's job, we're facing, when he is employed, but the income has
Mm.
drastically dropped. And we have had this happen before, with a job loss, with a workforce reduction, in 2016. And back then, I I just had this incredible strength in my heart. I just felt that that limitation was not limiting me. The Lord just infused me with such strength during that
Mhm.
time. It was 4 months that I just had a peace about everything. And no, our bank account was not like, it was not why I was
Mhm.
having that peace. It was absolutely supernatural. But this time I am feeling the limitation in a different way. And I have been kind of questioning myself so much, of like,
Mhm.
why is it that I'm facing the same limitation, the same, crisis, but I'm not, I'm grieving more this time.
Right.
I'm having a harder time.
Mhm. And I think your experience is so common for all of us. I mean, I can personally identify, I'm walking through a measure of grief about a limitation that's very much like something I walked through a year or two ago, and it just feels deeper and harder. And I think that's part of the gift of what God does for us, is that He enables us to walk the same road again and again, just in a deeper way. Like, why is it that in my 20s felt like I had really died to this notion of living the life that I wanted to live because of what I walked through what I walked through in my
Mm,
infertility. And then here I am again in my 40s and feeling those same, it's a different circumstance and it's the
right.
same feelings of, wait a second, this isn't what I wanted. And all this energy towards trying to fix it and change it. And how can I bound over this fence line and how can I make it work so that I get what I want? very similar to my infertility. And it's like the Lord just is letting me go deeper and deeper to the deeper corners of my heart that I don't think I could have faced when I was in my 20s and early 30s. But now I have a little bit more of an infrastructure and constitution to be able to
Mhm.
face that. I
Yes.
see that theme with a lot of friends where it's like the Lord just lets us, the landscape changes, the feelings are
Mhm.
very similar. And each time we go through it, it's like another pass around that same corner of the mountain where he's going, let's go deeper, higher, let's go deeper in or higher in. I can
Mm.
really relate.
Yes, because it can be confounding, right? For some people
Mhm.
that they have gone through something in the past and they were strong, they felt strong in the Lord, they have
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden something happens, and sometimes it can be something that is even not as drastic as what happened years ago, and
right.
you right, and you so it's just I believe I hear you, and I agree that
Mhm.
God wants us to be ever closer to Him.
Mhm.
And I think that that's part of that, is that longing, right? For
Mhm.
Him to be our all, in the moment, to fill in those spaces that are lacking in our
Yes.
lives, instead of like
Mhm.
time, instead of, because you talk about the too much, right? The like
Mhm.
you're just filling your life with too much things, and to the point that like you don't have enough, you don't have enough
Mhm.
time to God. And we one of the things that you talk that you and it's in one of your books, you talk about just finding pockets with God, to
Mhm.
presence with God throughout the days. How important has that become to you as you faced your limitations?
Oh, it's been critical. I think I have carried into how I've shaped that time, an understanding of my human limitations and my weakness. So I'm not expecting, if I want to connect with God in the middle of the day, I'm not expecting that it's going to be 30 minutes and really deep and lots of writing in my journal. Instead, I go, you know what? A minute matters. And if it's one more minute today, then tomorrow, then the next day is 3 more minutes.
Mm.
So for example, I take an afternoon time for 5, 10 minutes of silence and solitude, and then engaging with a little bit of his word and a little bit of writing around his word. And that feels like it settles my soul, because I could walk into that time like I do many days, looking at the overwhelming dishes and the overwhelming laundry and all the things that are in front of me to take care of this many children, and with only my human frame to do it. And go, there's no way. And all morning long, I'm feeling frustrated and irritated. I'm not really naming it. I'm just like snappy and sure. And then I sit down for that 10 minutes, and all of a sudden I go, oh, I've been feeling totally limited and I've not named it. And I just need to name, God, I feel like there's not enough of me for the needs in this house. Oh, the relief in just naming that. And then
Right.
and then I'm in his word, and it's like Psalm 16, the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. And it's 4 minutes of me just going, oh, that's right. You gave me these limits. Like, you put boundaries around what I could do in a day. You gave me 24 hours, not 36, not 25. And you made me 46. So I'm a little bit slower than I was 10 years ago. And if I can engage like that, then I go back into the afternoon feeling different.
And you say something about, like, even you mentioned about avoiding naming the big emotions in your life,
Mhm.
right? And that is also part of the rush, isn't it? We don't even know sometimes
Right.
what is it that's really prompting those responses, as you said, the and you talk about like the limitations. If you don't name them, and you don't acknowledge that there is something that has a name deep down inside that
Mhm.
is causing all of this response, the negative response of what you're talking about. And so one of the things that you talk is that um, it's very important to pay attention to ourselves,
Mhm.
right? So why do you believe that it is important for us to pay attention to ourselves, and what does that look like to you in a daily basis?
If we don't pay attention to ourselves, we don't know what to bring to God. And I think so many of us can relate to sitting before God and having it feel like we hear crickets. Like, what do I talk to God about? Or there's a big distance between what I read in his word and what I'm feeling in my heart. In order for me to know what to bring to God, I have to have some measure of understanding of what's happening inside of me. But I think so many of us feel the big emotions. We feel anger, we feel overwhelmed, we feel stress. And we just kind of let those be. They drive us. They drive what we do or how we relate. We're snappy. But if we can sit and start to go, what's underneath my overwhelm? Well, I did just hear from the school that I've got to turn in these 4 things. And I don't know that I'm going to actually get to be able to do those in that time. And I did just find out that this family member is coming to town to visit. And can I pull off a dinner? And, all those things that go through or this friend is sick and I really want to help take care of them. But I also, I need taking care of. So can I go help them right now? All those things, if I can sit down and name that, and notice that that's happening inside of me, then I actually have something to talk to God about. I think about my mom. I broke my ankle several years ago and was also pregnant at the same time. That's actually how I found out I was pregnant, is when they went to do an x-ray for my ankle, they had to do an ultrasound, or they had to give me a pregnancy test. Just it's a requirement. They won't do an x-ray without giving a pregnancy test. I found out I was pregnant. So I had a broken ankle and I was pregnant. And my mom, her sister called me and said, hey, I thought she was saying, we're hosting this little barbecue for your mom's 70th birthday. And she just was kindly letting me know. And I was in a fog, very tired from being newly pregnant and compromised with a broken ankle. So I just sort of, oh, great. I'm so glad you're doing that for my mom. We had plans to celebrate her in a couple of weeks after then. And then a day or two beforehand, I learned that my aunts and uncles were flying in from different parts of the country, and they were gathering pictures to put together a slideshow. And this was actually at a restaurant. It was a very fancy event to celebrate my mom. And I had missed what my aunt was telling me. And then how do I get on a plane when I can't carry a bag because I have a broken ankle? There was like no way for me in 2 or 3 days time to fly across the country and get to my mom's birthday. So I'm just feeling mad and upset and frustrated with myself. This is kind of what we do with our limitations. We just feel the surface emotion. I'm in a fog. But then when I finally, actually on the day of the party, as I'm getting texts about the party and I'm sitting down with God, I realize underneath it all, I'm feeling very sad that I'm not connected with my family. I'm feeling sad, like I'm missing out. I feel like, again, because of the number of children I have, because of being pregnant, there's another way that I'm hedged out from my family connecting. Well, that I can actually bring to God. That is a deeper way for me to connect to God when I feel alone and on the outside and like I don't fit, rather than just, why can't I just get on a plane and I don't get to go because of my broken ankle. So I think as we begin to identify what's happening inside of us, we actually have the opportunity for a deeper connect with God.
Absolutely. Very, very true. You cannot change if you don't even know what is
Right.
going on inside
Right.
your heart,
Yeah.
right? And if it's just all you see is this, the what external
Mm-hmm.
manifestations of what really is deep down inside. Um, Let me ask you this: is it possible, do you think, to find a balance between having hope for the future when you are in the midst of a limitation, having hope and acknowledging the limitations in your life?
Mm-hmm.
How do
Yeah,
you
I
do
mean, yes, and I think that's part of the process. Is our limitations are really a gift. Our limitations really are what God gifted us to enable us to be present with the life that he did give us. I love this. Dallas Willard says spiritual formation in Christ is a total interchange of our ideas and images for his, right?
that?
This is how we grow in God. My ideas and images for God's, but that we can't just snap our fingers and make that happen. So God limits us. So he gives us a fence line. So we don't get what we want. So we feel like on the other side of what we really want is a whole real wonderful life, but this life, And in hedging us in, he brings us to a place where we are kind of have to bring our emotions to him. We have to bring the ache of wanting a life that's not the life that we have. And as we bring that ache and we really grieve what our life isn't, we grieve the limitations, then we start to see, oh, God's meeting me here. And as he meets me, I start to find hope. It's that Romans tribulation produces perseverance, Perseverance produces character. Character
Mhm.
produces hope. It's a different hope. It's not the hope of,
Yeah.
I'm going to get everything I want. It's like the long-lived journey where I slowly realize, oh, God has a better story for me.
It's James 1, consider it all joy
Yes,
unveiled, right? It's like a
yes, yes.
unraveled, right? It's just that's what it is. So
That's right.
that's what James saying. It's just like you consider, because it produces endurance and it produces faith, and you're gonna have a perfect faith once you endure and you persevere with God. And
That's right.
that is so true. Well, you talk in the book about a come, die, grieve, and live cycle. Explain what you mean by that.
Yes. So it's come, die, grieve, and live. That is Easter weekend for
Okay.
us available every day. It is, I bring myself. The come is, I'm going to bring my raw emotions, where I am in this moment. I'm not going to clean myself up for God. And in coming, I recognize, oh, like what his word says, that he has actually given me a cross. And if I'm going to find my life, I actually have to lose it. If I'm going to say, if I search for life, I'm going to lose it. If I want to save my life, I have to lose it. Right.
Yep.
And so the grieve, the die is, I'm going to let go of my story. And the part of the letting go is that Saturday of Easter weekend where I sit in the grief. And sometimes our Saturdays are year or 2 or 3. And I sit in the grief of what I thought my life was going to be and what it actually is. And I grieve that with God so that ultimately I get a real resurrection Sunday. As Christians, we so often skip steps. We just want to move from Friday to Sunday. And we don't recognize that many of us have to live some significant amount of time in the grief in order to really live. That there's a power in grief, that grief enables me to move towards seeing my limitations as a gift.
Man, you're speaking to me so loudly
Mhm.
today, really, with what you're saying, because you read quite the opposite. You know, in many books out there,
Mhm.
quite the opposite. And what I'm saying, I'm not talking at all about the naming and claiming. I'm not. I'm talking about the see ahead as a done deal, as done, right? Your promise is done, which is so true, right? God is
Mhm.
outside of time, and
Mhm.
his promises are outside of time and in time. So
Mhm.
we know that all his promises are yes and amen. And we know that. And we know that we can trust him to be
Mhm.
the provider, the faithful provider, the faithful sustainer, the faithful healer in his time. We know all of that. And I hear a lot of that project in your mind and in your heart as it's a done deal. And that's perfect faith.
Mhm.
I actually literally read this just the other way, that perfect faith is the faith that just faces the trial and just says, it's done. But
Mhm.
you are inviting us to sit down and
Mhm.
say, listen, I know that one day it will be done. But I am grieving right now.
Oh, yes. And it
One doesn't eliminate the other,
right. And I think
right?
sometimes we're so afraid of grief. We humans are really afraid of grief because we haven't quite encountered the God who is near to the brokenhearted. Right. And so, because of our own fear of grief, we sometimes develop theologies that don't enable us to sit in grief when it's in the word. The psalmists were people who grieved. They sat in their pain. I think of Psalm 22, my God, my God. I mean, the words that Jesus actually used on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? God gives us permission, not only permission to grieve, but it feels like a passageway that I have to grieve in order to really live Resurrection Sunday in my personal life. And yet, so many of us are afraid of it, myself included. Grief feels unknown and it feels unfamiliar, and we're afraid that it's never going to end. So we don't want to go there. We want to quickly get to Sunday. So we skip Saturday, we skip steps, and we go from the cross to resurrection and miss that there's actually an in-between time where there's a profound reforming that happens. And if we keep skipping it, I feel like the mercy of God is that he lets us continue to be limited
Mm.
enough until we finally say, Uncle, okay, Lord,
Wow.
this is painful. And so it's, it's you and I talking about why are we facing some of the same limitations we have before, and we could do it better before. Well, I think some of it is the Lord going, I want to get in deeper. I maybe could have grieved my infertility for a certain amount of time. My current limitation, the Lord is saying, can you stay here a little longer? Because there's going to be a lot of fruit in the grief if you stay with me and let me hold you.
Oh, goodness. It's such a gift to really to think of our limitations or our circumstances with this permission. And it's not even a permission to grieve. It's really an invitation,
Yes, I like that. It is. I mean,
right?
it is permission, but it is the Lord saying, hey, grief is actually a bridge to surrender. Grief
Yes.
is actually the way to get to Psalm 16. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. We can't just snap our fingers and believe that. I can't have these big limitations in my life
Mhm.
and just all of a sudden shift and go, they're great. God gave this to me. But if I grieve, in that process of being held in my pain, I start to go, oh, this is going to be okay. This isn't going to kill me. And you're going to meet me and you have a better story for me.
Yes. And there's the live, the come, die, grieve, and then
And
live.
live.
And that's where the power of God's word and his promises, right? His Holy Spirit just
Absolutely.
comes and does that restoration in your heart, that
Mhm.
the mending of the heart. I love that so much. Oh, Sarah, I could talk to you all day
Oh, this is
about all these
so
things. This is
sweet.
amazing. But just as we finish our time together, I wanted you to just tell me. I know that your book has very practical guidance for people who are having a hard time finding the gift of
Mhm.
their limitations. Tell us how this book, in your experience, can help someone who's having a hard time finding the gift.
Statistics say that we have 6,000 thoughts in a day. And I think there's a lot we want to grow our capacity to do more, to be present, to in front of us. And so we tweak things in our schedule. We try and move pieces around when in reality, there's a great power that happens, a great formation that happens in our minds. And one of the things that I've written about in this book is how we bring those thoughts that are making us feel resentful of our limitations, angry at God, but we maybe haven't named it, overwhelmed, stressed, like we just can't get there, bringing those thoughts to God so that these 6,000 things that are happening in our mind in a day actually we clear the cache a bit and receive his thoughts about our story and his thoughts about our life and his way with us and our limitations. We start to see that the limitations we've resented are purposed, that there's a way with us that is often slower still than what we think, that he is slowly moving us towards reorienting our stories around his story for us. And a lot of it's happening here in our minds and the way we see our limitations and the way we respond to them, what we think in the background of our minds as we're washing dishes and driving to the post office. Those things are informing a lot of our day. And this book is an effort to say, let's bring those things out into the light, what we really think, what we really feel, and let's place them in the lap of God and let him begin to reorient what's up here in our minds so that we might see this story through his eyes.
Love that. Well, we all face limitations, and many of my listeners are facing a limitation today.
Mm-hmm.
And you may be having a hard time understanding why is it that you're in this spiritual funk. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like things are just not moving. And I believe that this book is a gift. I started reading and I'm like, I'm going to finish this because it's definitely for me
Oh,
today. It is a gift. The gift of limitations is a gift to my current
thank you,
limitations.
Patricia. Thank you.
So I'm very, very happy that your PR has contacted me to
Oh,
review
I'm so
this,
grateful to be able to
and
chat.
and it will be a wonderful material for one of my columns for the Atlanta Journal. So
Oh,
I'm
that'd be
very,
wonderful.
very excited about writing for that. And
Oh, I'd love to see your writing there.
oh, good. And I'll send that to you for sure, whenever it comes out. But what a pleasure to
Thank
meet
you. This was
you.
a gift to me too. We have a sweet connect, an understanding
Yeah,
of pain and walking with God through it.
that's right. That's right. Well, I know this is not going to be your last book, so I hope to see you again.
Thank you, Patricia. You too.
Thank you.